Good morning, everyone. Heather Martinez here, Neuland ambassador and proud member of the Visioneering team. Want to welcome you. I'd like to do a brush lettering demo today. I'm making an exemplar for Neuland. Just to remind you, have your markers on hand, a practice pad, the hand lettering learning practice pad by Neuland, or paper, and your Be Visible Right Now poster. You could have gotten it in the mail. It looks like this. Just a quick commercial. If you want to continue lettering with me and you want to use the supplies that I use, you can go to Neuland.com/Heather's Choice, and there is a discounted kit available there that you can purchase. And I'll be using this in all of my upcoming workshops and for any free online tutoring and any online classes as well. And if you want to follow along, next week I'll be covering some of the handouts, but I'll also be sharing with you how I do my lettering practice. But there's free PDF download at Neuland.com/hand lettering. And those are 4 exemplars that you can use to practice your big one, your number one, your fine one, and your art marker. And just a couple of upcoming events. I'll be teaching in Santa Clara, California on June 20th. You can go to bit.ly/SCCA, all caps SCCA, and then lowercase lettering to sign up there. It's a full day in-person class, so that's going to be exciting. And then the virtual webinar that's coming up, you can visit at meetup.com/Nova-Scribes, all cap Nova -uppercase S Scribes, and that's a $10 webinar. It will be recorded, but if you want to see it live and ask questions, I suggest that you tune in then, and that is on May 18th, so next week. So let's get started. I want to show you the 3 pages in the hand lettering pad. It comes with a big one, a number one, and an ArtMarker practice pad that I designed, that I use not only in my practice, but I also use in teaching. And so you can imagine that the thicker the marker, the more space that you're going to have to work with. So there's the number one. As you can see, my edge is a little dirty because I use it with my, my circle template, and then ArtMarker. And so the difference between these two are not only the space between the baseline, the midline, and the ascender and descender lines, but also on the ArtMarker pad, you'll notice that there are some slant guidelines. And what that means is if we're writing at a slant, we need to be able to have some guidelines to help us get the slant correct. So I'll be working off of that today. Now these are flip chart size. They're big, they're beautiful sized practice sheets. When I'm working on desktop, oftentimes I'll fold them in half like this, or I'll fold them into smaller sizes that allow me to write, this is about 11 by 17, or I believe A3 ledger size or tabloid size. And so I'll be using this size today. Now when I'm using my ArtMarker, I love to practice in one of the grays. If you have the S'mores gray tones, I love working in those because it allows me to see where my lines intersect and overlap. But I also love the outliner too. You can also use either of these practice sheets. A lot of times I'll use the regular number one practice sheet when using an ArtMarker if I'm not worried about the slant. But today, because we're creating an exemplar of brush lettering, and it's all going to be lowercase today, then I'm going to use one with slants. Now you want to make sure that you have good ArtMarker care. So be sure that you have a nice new tip. I just put this tip in this morning, so it's nice and new. And this is, of course, is refillable. It doesn't bleed, it doesn't stink, so I love Neuland for that. And to get started, let's see, I folded this over a couple of times. We'll start with this part here, just so that we can do some warm-up strokes. I like to warm up. I literally haven't drawn anything this morning, but I enjoy warming up. And the way that I warm up is first ask the question, anytime I have a marker or a new, or even if it's not new, I like to be able to test my nib. I ask, what is this marker designed for and what else can it do? So I like to create a pin scale. So by holding your marker as horizontal as you can, meaning horizontal this way as opposed to, I'm going to call this vertical, holding that down and pressing as far as you can, start and just make one thick line. And notice that this is probably going to be the thickest line that you can create if you're holding it the most horizontal and pressing down the hardest. But then as you move your marker more vertical and press less, your lines are going to get slightly thinner and thinner to the point where the thinnest line that you can create with this art marker would be to have it very vertical, but also parallel to the line you're drawing, meaning I'm just going to drag my line. So what this tells me is all of these strokes were down strokes, and this stroke was an upstroke, right? So all these were created by going down, and this was created by going up. And that's the basic rule for brush lettering, that if you want your letters to look really nice, all of your lines down are going to be thick, and all of your lines up are going to be thin. So thick down, thin up is the rule, right? I'll write that out. Oops. Thin up. So thick down, thin up. Notice that when I make my V like this, I stop between each stroke. Now, brush lettering is not cursive using an art marker. It's actually a very specific way of making marks and putting them together to make a letter. So practice with me, make a couple of V's that are continuous. And notice that when I want to make a really thick line, my marker is perpendicular to the thick line that I'm making. And when I make a thin line, it's actually more parallel. Maybe not completely, but more so. So now that you've got the thick down, thin up, now we're going to work on some curves. So a good practice piece, let me get my practice cheat sheet out here, and I'm going to follow these lines. These nice lines like this are going to help me stay with the slant that I'm going for. So I'm going to go thick down, thin up, and thick down. So I'm making sort of a U shape, and then I'm turning that into sort of an N shape. So these are the types of shapes that you're going to see in your lettering. And then if you start with at the baseline and going thin up, of course you're going to go thin, and then thick, and then thin. Watch me carefully as I do that again. I'm using very light pressure. Now I'm pressing down, and I'm using very light pressure again. And the secret to getting this nice transition here is that when you transition here, you're actually thinking about it and looking at that, where you're going to draw that transition up here. Same with this. You're going to make the transition here, but you're actually looking at it and thinking about it from here. On here, you've got a transition and transition, but you're thinking about it before you actually get there. Once you've made some of those, you don't have to make too many, just get to that point where you really feel the transition between the thins and the thicks and the thins again. And I suggest just doing it like this, not over and over and over, because it's one place where you're really using your fingers and your wrists to make this shape. If you do it over and over and over, you're introducing your elbow and your shoulder, and that's just a lot to have to manage all at once. So let's do baby steps, right? Now, a couple of other strokes that you can practice is an entry stroke, which means some of your letters will start with a curve that goes up that's light, and then a thick down. So we can draw a couple of those. And this with the stem that goes down would be letters like an N or an M. So all these practice strokes you're going to see yourself using throughout your lettering, and you'll see me using throughout the lettering exemplar that I create. After you make some of those, think about making an O. This O shape is actually going to be in a lot of your letters. Your A, your B, part of your C, your D, your E. And so the trick about O's is you've got that transition. And notice I'm not really connecting that up here. That's okay. I'll show you why. Because when we create a letter out of this shape, like that, I'm just going over that area that didn't meet up. So that doesn't have to be perfect. And notice that I'm starting, if you were to look at this like it's a clock, I'm starting it at about the 1 o'clock position. And notice where my tip is. It's pointing towards where I want to go because the thick side, which is on the left side, needs to be perpendicular. So again, there's an O. If you can master this shape, wow, half of your alphabet is going to look fantastic. Now there's another variation to this shape, and it's a little bit of a triangle shape. And it looks funny as an O, but it looks really nice when you add that to other shapes, like to make another shape, because you have a nice thick, nice big space down here. Same with the A, right? So let's make a couple of those shapes too. This shape you're going to see sometimes with your eye. This is going to be an ascender shape. It's going to be used, well, right now it's an L, it could be a D, it could be an H, just so that you get that thick and thin up. And notice that I'm finishing all of my letters midway between the baseline and the top of the X height. And that's because I want it to be able to connect. Okay? So after you do a few of these warm-ups, let me go ahead and do a quick demo on my lettering. Now, I may not break down the whole lettering alphabet for you. You can actually see one that's completely broken down on Diane Bleck's Doodle Girl and Friends site, I believe. I did a piece with her, but this is just a quick demo. I wanted to get you warmed up, just a quick demo because we'll do more of this next week. So if you tune in next week, throughout the week, I'll be doing periscopes on all of the different tools that I use in my toolkit. So right now, I'm just going to do the entire alphabet. Notice how slow I'm going. And that's because I'm not thinking about drawing letters. I'm thinking about the shapes that make up letters. Right now, if you're practicing along with me, the thing to concentrate on are the shapes, your transitions, you can get spacing later, but notice where you're starting, where you're stopping. Notice the baseline, that's this line, the darker line along the bottom, your X height, for those of you that take my classes, you know how I make every single one of these letters, how they come together, how they connect. Breathing is important. You want to make sure that you're not breathing in when you're drawing a very straight line, that you're having a nice fluid breath out. Okay. We have a descender here. Notice how the shapes that I've already taught you are being used over and over. There's a new one. You've learned part of this, but this one is slightly new. But remember that some of these are just repeat shapes. Different variation on an R. Different variation on an S. So many tricks. There's so many things. If you watched my, I did an exemplar last week on brush lettering. If you saw that, I went through the detail of more of these letters and what I'm thinking about when I draw each one of these lines, right? Let's do the cursive Z. What? If that's too much, you can go with a regular Z. So there we have it. This is the basic exemplar that I wanted to show you today. I'd like to invite you back to my Periscopes that I will be having all next week. I'll be covering everything that's in the Heather's Choice kit, which you can find at Neuland.com, Heather's Choice. And if you want to follow along with me, I will be covering some of the free downloads that you can get at Neuland.com/hand lettering. Thank you so much for joining me today. I will be posting this video on my Facebook page, Corporate Graffiti Artist. I hope you'll join me there. And